Welcome to Litquake, San Francisco's literary festival. I'm Jack Bulworthy, co-founder and executive director, and our festival runs from October 7th to the 23rd right here at litquake.org. We are live virtually, recorded virtually, live indoors, and live outdoors this year. Today, we are honored to be able to present a virtual event showcase for our good friends, the international publishing house World Editions, featuring authors Kit Fan and Petra Hůlová and moderator Adam Dalva. Through the miracle of Zoom, we are all live from England, the Czech Republic, New York City, and the San Francisco Bay Area. Many thanks to everyone for watching today. This event is sponsored by Center for the Art of Translation and co-presented by World Editions. So let's meet our authors. Kit Fan was born in Hong Kong and moved to the UK at the age of 21. He studied at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and received a PhD from the University of York. His fiction and poetry have received many prizes and awards, and in 2020, he was a visiting scholar at the Gulbenkian Museum in Lisbon, Portugal. His newest work, the novel Diamond Hill, is set in Hong Kong in 1987 and represents a requiem for a disappearing city, as well as a meditation on powerlessness, religion, memory, and displacement. He is speaking to us live from his home in York, England. Petra Hůlová's provocative novels, plays, and screenplays have won numerous awards, and she is a regular commentator on current events for the Czech press. She studied at universities in Prague, Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, and New York, and was a Fulbright scholar in the US. Her novels and plays have been translated into 13 languages. Her newest work is a socio-critical satire of sexual norms entitled The Movement. She joins us live from her home outside Prague. And finally, our moderator, Adam Dalva, his writing has appeared in The New Yorker, the Paris Review, the New York Review of Books, and The Guardian. His graphic novel, Olivia Twist, was published by Dark Horse in 2019. Adam serves on the board of the National Book Critics Circle and is a book critic for Guernica Magazine and Publishers Weekly. He teaches creative writing at Rutgers University and Marymount Manhattan College. He is joining us from Brooklyn, New York. A few quick orders of business before we begin. Don't forget to follow Litquake on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest updates. You can also support all of the authors here today by buying their books. That's why they write them. You can either go to your independent bookstore and ask for them, or you can go to Litquake's bookshelf on the bookshop.org platform, and that will direct you to your nearest independent bookseller. We also ask for your support of the Litquake organization to allow us to continue bringing you these events for free. We are a nonprofit based in one of the world's most expensive cities, and if you believe in keeping literature a key component of the cultural landscape of this city, please consider dropping us a few dollars. Every bit helps. You can do so via Venmo or PayPal, or you can donate directly at litquake.org. We have an audience Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to ask questions throughout, and we'll get to them towards the end of the program. So let's get on with the show. Please welcome Kit, Petra, and Adam.
Great. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Jack. And Kit and Petra, such an honor to be with you today. Both these books are amazing. And when I found out they were going to be in dialogue with each other, I became very excited to sort of see all the strange neuro overlaps between your two works. We thought as a sort of running order, we would have first Kit read and then Petra for just a few minutes each from their novels, so you can get an ear for them as an audience. And then I'll moderate a Q&A session. And as Jack said, there's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and please feel free to put questions in anytime. We'll make sure we dedicate the last few minutes of our presentation today to get all those questions heard. So Kit, if you wouldn't mind starting, we'd love to hear something from Diamond Hill.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here with you and Petra. And thank you, Litquake, for inviting me to join this year's festival. I'm just going to read for not more than 5 minutes, just the beginning of the novel Diamond Hill. Is when the protagonist, who is called Buddha, he doesn't call himself Buddha, but other people call him Buddha, arrives from Bangkok into Diamond Hill, which is the last shanty town in Hong Kong. The first thing I heard when I arrived in Diamond Hill was a boy's cry coming from an alleyway that smelled of piss. The cry was short and low, as if the boy was swallowing his angry breath, as if he held a grudge against being born in this shanty town infested by moths. It was before the season of thunder and cockroaches. I continued down the alley and searched for the path towards the hills without a clue which direction I was heading in. The journey from Bangkok to Hong Kong was tiring, though I had traveled light with little in my suitcase. I had been sent by Dashi, an old monk in Bangkok, who had disappeared some months earlier. He'd saved me from death many times. The young monks in Wat Arun said he had gone to the mountains to meditate on the earth's sufferings. I waited and waited for him to return. He didn't or wouldn't. Why did I wait for him? When he didn't show up after a month, I obeyed his command and ended up back here where I began. I hated Hong Kong so much, I thought I'll never set foot in this damned city again. Here I was, with nowhere else to go, seeking shelter in a nunnery. What the hell was I doing here? Why had Dashi sent me back here from Wat Arun? I missed Bangkok already. The shantytown was a maze, all its lanes and paths twisted and crisscrossed randomly. Most houses were wooden or metal shacks, one leaning precariously on another, each fitted with wafer-thin walls. Cardboard houses were built on top of tin box houses, built on top of wooden houses. Red demolition notices were glued on all the doors. Despite its hard edges, sociability was abundant everywhere. Lives traveled through the thin walls onto the narrow streets. Children shrieking after playing a game of dice, food being tossed in woks, men cursing at an unlucky house after a race in Happy Valley, plastic flip-flop clip-plopping on hard concrete floors. It was 2 years since I had set foot in Hong Kong, and it already looked a different beast. Of course, the city still breathed money, but everyone knew what would happen in 10 years' time. On 1st of July 1997, the last colony of the British Empire would return to China. Perhaps it was easier for me to return knowing there was an expiry date for my home city. Before I left Hong Kong, all I knew was how to shut myself out of life. This city was a cruel place, especially to failures like me. At the end of the alley, a dog was sniffing torn rubbish bags. He looked shit scared, like a drug addict. I wondered what I looked like in the eyes of the shit scared dog. Thank you.
Bravo. What a great introduction. It just hooks us right in. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And
Thank you.
It only gets wilder from there for poor Buddha. Thank you so much, Kit. And Petra, we'd love to hear a few pages from the movement, if that's possible.
Yeah, I will read a couple of minutes. It's a story told by a lecturer who works in a re-educational institution for men. So it's told via her eyes, and I read. Today is the first weekend of the month, Open Door Day. I show the visitors around, women, married couples, and men, to the canteen, the classrooms, the client dorms, And if anyone is interested, I also take them down to the solitary confinement cells. Back when the Institute was a meatpacking plant, the basement rooms were used to store preservatives, barrels of flavoring, and spare parts for the conveyor belts, all non-perishable items immune to the damp, which clients tend to complain about after their second, third, or fourth month locked away. We sympathize with the fact that it's damp, but not with the complaints, since there are reasons why the men are sent to solitary, and those reasons are reviewed by at least 3 people, section hand, doctor, and guard, as well as the nursing staff. My Misha would go out of his mind in here, says a long-legged blonde as I give her the tour. Her knees nearly buckle as she peeks into one of the 2 cells, both currently vacant, and even though just a moment ago when I took her through the garden, she was ready to send her husband here next week, it looks like now she's starting to reconsider. You said he suggested you get breast implants, which would mean he qualifies for the maximum stay with us. I wonder which illegal clinic he wants to send her to, the loud, since external cosmetic modifications have been illegal for at least 5 years. Manhood Watch has spent those years bemoaning the fact that procedures now take place in unsanitary and unprofessional conditions. But in the old world, when doctors screwed up a woman's plastic surgery, nobody gave 2 hoots. And what else was a plastic surgery clinic but the old world in a microcosm? After the Interior Ministry basement, the second place Rita bombed was a plastic surgery clinic without hesitation. And I say without hesitation because she blew it up just 3 days after the ministry. The whole country was gripped with panic. Out of fear for the safety of their employees, most clinics interrupted operations within a few days. The doctors just stopped going to work. But I'm the one who wants them, the woman replies as I relatch the basement door. We head up to my office. Then I dash out and a minute later come right back with coffee. One for me, one for her. I know her experience the conversation will take at least an hour. An hour for me to convince her plus another till she signed the papers. And if you asked me what percentage of women who come to the Institute to have their men interned end up in facilities themselves, I would say 15 plus. Community centers is what we call the treatment facilities for women. It'll give you a chance to relax, Mrs. Ptáčková, I say, handing packets of sugar across the desk. I don't intend to hide anything. It's solely up to her. While your husband is here being treated for his addiction to porn, you can rid yourself of your addiction to make up the ideal of the old world figure and your obsession with the size of your breasts, I say, as she stirs sugar into her coffee. I figure she must be from the countryside. It's the only way to explain how she's been getting away with her illegal behavior. In some rural areas, the old world is still hanging on, tooth and nail. I know from the media as well as from my colleagues who passed through several villages on their way to the capital for the anniversary of Frida's speech in Euro Parliament. The world does not look at you, you look at it. I choose my words carefully. It's important not to moralize, or she might be scared of and not even bring us her husband. Choosing the right words in the midst of so many prejudices is like walking through a minefield. But introducing the new world in a way that will appeal to a woman with no education, you have to forget finesse and take the blunt approach. For starters, there is nothing wrong with pigging out on sweets, I say. Suddenly, Mrs. Ptáčková is all ears. With a figure like yours, you can do whatever you want. Once Misha completes his re-education, the only thing that will matter to him is what you are like on the inside. Your true self, the richness of your soul, the way you relate to each other. which means you can finally grow old without worrying and eat whatever you want as long as you keep an eye on your health. But that's purely up to you. The blonde stares silently into her coffee. Every community center program includes wellness procedures and field trips. The one I'd recommend to you is next to a preserve with natural mineral springs. I remember my own visit there several years ago, the paths in adjacent park where the residents went for walks between procedures were lined with the rare variety of orange tulips. Does wellness include cosmetics? Asks the blonde. I've been considering permanent makeup, she adds, and I wonder what kind of backwater she must be from to be thinking about getting something that years ago women in cities paid good money to have removed, and whether diversity is really the right word to describe the diametrically opposed situation between cities and rural areas, or if it's time to bring the term two-speed Europe back into style. In the end, we agree that Mrs. Ptáčková, like so many others, will attend the community center on an outpatient basis. The movement has no desire to drag women away from their children, especially not nowadays, when thanks to our efforts, their interest in giving birth has increased. I think what finally tipped the scale was my comment about her husband's young female co-workers, whom she mentioned in passing, setting me up for the smash. After his stay at the Institute, he won't pay any attention to those girls at the front desk anymore. That I guarantee. Hearing those words, it was like a weight lifted from her shoulders, and when I told her again that she could eat whatever she wanted and that the community center offered an all-you-can-eat buffet 24/7, she was practically in the bag, especially when she revealed that the main reason she wanted to get her breasts enlarged was because of the girls at her husband's job. You really think he'll still love me when I'm old? She asked skeptically. It was as if she had slept right through the last decade. She insisted on showing me the bags under her eyes to make me understand. She smiled when I told her we didn't have any mirrors. That clinched the deal. After 2 hours in my office, she walked out in a state of elation. I'll drop him off on Wednesday, I promise, right after work. Thank you.
Bravo. What a great overview of this harrowing world you've created in the movement, where men go to this treatment center to be re-educated, to look for the inner beauty of women, and the re-education takes on darker and darker aspects as the novel goes along. That was wonderful. So I thought I might begin by asking each of you a sort of specific question about the kind of idea and genesis of your work, and after that, some questions that we can both talk about. So maybe Petra, we'll start with you, and then Kit. I'd love to hear, Petra, how the idea for the movement came about and how you ended up executing it so precisely to create this dystopia.
The sources of inspiration were many. It's quite an ambiguous book. It's kind of a feminist manifesto, but at the same time criticism of feminism of sorts. And it pretty much started when I was, or one of the inspirations were when I was walking the city a couple of years ago with my daughter. She was 5 years old that time, and there was this big advertisement, this billboard on the street, and there was this lady in bikini advertisement for yogurt or car, or I don't even remember. And my daughter asked me this very crucial question. She asked me, "Mom, why is the lady naked?" And you don't really want to explain the truth to a 5-year-old girl, but you also don't want to lie. It's just impossible to answer this question somehow. And but this very much mirrors also the world we live in. So this petty situation was definitely one of my inspirations.
And it turns into a wonderful scene in the book that recurs a few times, that the founder of this movement as a little girl asks that question to her mother.
Yeah. I used it for the founder of the movement. Yeah.
I love that. Kit, how about you? Where did this wonderful novel come from?
It came from, I think, the spirit in Hong Kong, really. I haven't lived there for so long, but I always wanted to show parts of Hong Kong that is not what tourism images people have in mind. It's not only about the skyscrapers and the financial center. I wanted to show the last shanty town in Hong Kong, which was really was in a very central area. I also wanted to show, like many cities, really, it has this kind of terrifying contrast of the rich and the poor. And Hong Kong is very much like the crystallized version of capitalism. And I want to set it in 1987, which was 3 years after the John Declaration was signed between Britain and China to hand over Hong Kong. It's also 2 years before the Tiananmen massacre, and also 10 years before the handover of Hong Kong, because I'm kind of interested in this sort of in-between times when big historical moments happened in history, but then we just focus on those landmarks, but actually there are lots of weird stuff happened between the landmarks. And so I just started thinking about 1987 and this little shanty town in Hong Kong. A really unlikely inspiration, I have to say, but somehow the characters just started speaking to me in a way I didn't expect it to.
And there's also the financial crash in 87, which you handle in a terrific scene in a taxi. I wanted to kind of, just for viewers who might not have read this yet, the shantytown is also set in a place that was a sort of Hollywood area in the years before the book is set. Bruce Lee was sort of in it at one point. And so this idea, and I think it has some overlap with Petra's book, of a sort of place that's changed and is about to change again, something in sort of in-between states, was very interesting to me. And how did kind of the Hollywood aspect play into what you were doing?
Well, thanks for bringing it up, because I think cinema in Hong Kong has always been almost like a kind of lifeline for Hong Kong people. It's such a small city, and I think cinema is a form of escape, but also it was the second biggest film industries in the world in the 50s and 60s. It is really like amazing times in Hong Kong when I think from the 40s, 50s to kind of mid 60s. They make thousands of films, but within a few years, this all disappeared. And I think you talk about Petra's book, that sense of kind of things were about to change again. And I think sometimes we take things for granted just because it's happened or it's existed for a while. But I think the film industry, for me in the novel, somehow symbolizes that sense of kind of glamour that has disappeared, but somehow is lingering, and it has the kind of past glamour infected all the characters in the book. Somehow it became a kind of burden, but also a disease. That's how I see it.
Oh, that's so interesting. I like that. So now to sort of bring us together, both of you have written books with very strong, not just senses of place, but a sort of mapping of place. Petra, I'm thinking of the institute that the men are educated in, is very, very strongly mapped in your book. And you really kind of take us through the logistics of this former meat processing plant and all the things that happen in it. And Kit, you have the sort of world of Diamond Hill and then the nunnery where Buddha lives. So maybe starting with Petra, I was wondering how the sort of map of place was working for you in this book.
Well, you know, I work pretty much intuitively, so I just started. It's usually I start with a feeling, with a sort of a landscape of emotions and landscape of actions that I want to have in the book, but it's very, very blurred, and in the process of writing it all gets sharp. It all gets like more sharp form. So, but broadly speaking, the inspiration for the re-educational institution was something between wellness center slash hospital slash prison.
Yeah.
So because you know, people there are called clients, and it's as if, you know, kind of a service is being made there to them, but at the same time they are also prisoners of sorts, though voluntarily, even though it's a question how much voluntary their presence there really is. So my aim was to create an ambivalent place that is that has kind of confusing qualities, because it's also what I haven't mentioned, educational center, so it's also kind of a school, and but what you should feel is great discomfort when you read about the center, but it you know, the ideals there, the reason why men are being re-educated is basically pretty much wrapped up in the scene with the billboard that I mentioned. That just simply everything is not okay, and we should change it, and we should change men look at women, because women get often objectified and assessed just according their youth and beauty, so it should be changed. But then the process and how it's being practiced is problematic. So all the ambivalence also should be mirrored in the place.
When I think that's absolutely, I was unsettled by the place and disoriented, and I was thinking about like a panopticon where everyone can see into every other window, and Kit, your lead, is also sort of in a permeable space. He's the only man in this nunnery. Seems like people are looking through his window in the dark whenever he least expects it. So one thing I was thinking that's a little bit the opposite of Petra's book, but also in a way working along the same lines, is Buddha being the only man who's ever stayed in this nunnery, and the place you kind of built around him that's full of also surveillance and unsettling things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the nunnery is very important in the novel, partly because Diamond Hill, the real area in Hong Kong in Diamond Hill, there is this very famous nunnery. So it's kind of loosely, not based on it, but it's one of the most beautiful places in Hong Kong that I often visit. But I was every time I visit, I was very taken by how a house of religion somehow carries so much force in a locality, in a city, or in a village, wherever, somehow a place of religion, whether we believe in that religion or not, it somehow creates almost like a force field around it. And I think in the nunnery, in Diamond Hill, the nunnery is such a place. Like Petra's wellness center, people go to this nunnery not because they were criminalized and in prison. They went there according to their own will. They opted to go there to be a nun, and that is in a way a form of restriction to one's lives, but also for those people it could be a life of possibility or redemption. And I think is very important for the novel, but also very important for me as the writer of the novel, because it somehow helps me write in a way that I didn't expect to. When I'm writing about the nunnery, I felt like I'm also in the nunnery. I have to be really be very careful about my language. How am I kind of portray the world outside Hong Kong? What you can bring in, what you can't bring into the nunnery. That sense of restriction for me was, in a way, very inspirational.
I love that. I love that you didn't want to curse as much when you were writing those scenes. That I think that's a sign that it was working. And that really leads me to maybe one question that I think you're both dealing with very strongly, which is the question of belief. Petra, in your book, Vera, the lead character, seems to be, of any character we meet, the person who most believes in what she's doing. She seems to be closer to being, although she begins to question it maybe a little bit, like a true believer was how I was thinking of her, and that everyone else around her was trying to undermine her. Whereas Kit, in your book, the true belief seems to be with the head nun, and then everyone around her seems to not quite believe as strongly, although she also has some complications, of course. So I'm wondering how you both, maybe starting with Petra, approached this question of belief in your books, because it felt very fundamental to your projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Vera, the narrator, the lecturer of the institution, she really believes in the methods of re-education and all that, but it's also her daily job, so it's just she does not question it very much, and there are moments of, let's say, doubts, but they are very quickly gone, and she, in the end of the book, she is the same believer that she was in the very beginning. So I didn't want her journey make a journey of self-reflection or journey of how one gets aware about whatever he or she believes. I wanted to show the strength of belief, the stiffness of a certain ideal that is impenetrable by virtually anything that might happen around, but also I don't want to make it sound like I'm critical to Vera, because at the same time I feel I go with her and I have a great understanding for her. But you know, that 2 moments, to make it shorter, what was important there is to make her same believer in the beginning and in the end. So basically nothing changes in that way. And also she is a part of institution. She is insider and she is one of the top people there, let's say, or she is well positioned. And also we've heard many stories of institutions told by like inmates and outsiders and people from the bottom like victims, and I wanted to tell a different story from different perspective.
That was something I really admired about the book. I feel like it takes courage as a writer to say that you're not going to have that character shift very strongly, like an epiphany. That instead, at the end, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a fabulous kind of scene at the end, the graduation ceremony for the men, which is quite the sequence. She's still feeling things like she did at the beginning of the novel, and I really admire that. And it seemed to me to be kind of a statement about the kind of people who can be good, fine people who are just not necessarily going to challenge every dogmatic worldview they encounter.
Thank you.
Kit, what about you?
I think in a state of intense confusion, that's when belief becomes most extreme. And I think, I don't think my characters actually believe in, well, I don't feel the characters in Diamond Hill really believe in what they try to believe in, what they want to set out to do, but I think the situation is just too horrific for them. I mean, imagine basically your home, not your home, but your entire neighborhood will just be eradicated, completely flattened out. I think in that situation, it's hard to imagine the kind of future you set out to achieve is achievable. But in the book, we do have a bunch of very strong female characters trying to change their fate, and you do have a very strong sense of strong sense of self-belief. In the case of the Iron Nun, she wanted to kind of save her nunnery. In the case of a teenage drug leader called Boss, she believed in the death of Hong Kong. There's no hope. We just need to just make as much money as possible selling drugs and then go somewhere else. So I think a lot of the beliefs in Diamond Hill are very close to self-deception.
Yeah, I like that. And if I can maybe then follow up with you and then back to Petra, you touched on the darkness in this book. This is a book with, I would say, moments of deep, radiant joy and kind of profound connection, but there is a lot of darkness, deep examinations of heroin addiction, harrowing violence. And I'm wondering how, as a writer, you have darkness, not just on the periphery, but very much in the world of your book. How do you kind of handle that balance that I think you managed to strike here with all the sadness and darkness you're dealing with? Kit first, and then.
She's. Do you want me to?
So first Kit, and then Petra, maybe. So how did you handle things like the heroin, and there's just so much despair in your book?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Petra has to hear in kind of the drug flow through the book too. I mean, heroin addiction, I wasn't very conscious of it as a motif, I have to say. I just feel like the protagonist, Buddha, he's very much a wounded person, and if it's not heroin, it would be something else. But that sense of addiction, I think, in a way, is quite true of the moment. I feel like the 80s in Hong Kong, everybody was addicted to money. It's not like, I think people are still addicted to money, but in the 80s, it was the good times. We didn't have any awareness of climate change. We didn't have any awareness of kind of sense of collective responsibility. Stock market was really good. The novels set in 1987, you talk about the financial crisis, but until then, it was good times, Even after the financial crisis, back into the kind of early 90s, it was still good times. People were still spending lots of money. So I feel like maybe the theme of addiction is the sense could work on a metaphorical level.
I think, and to go to Petra, in your book, I feel the addiction you're dealing with is the male addiction to the female, the conventionally attractive, societally declared attractive female body, and all the ways that you are sort of trying to examine how you would decondition a man. And many of these scenes are extremely, kind of, we were talking with Kit, like challenging to read. Scenes where men are forced to masturbate, scenes where men are being monitored while having sex. And I was wondering about the sort of logical creation of this re-education for this very deep societal addiction.
Yeah, I will also say a little bit about the darkness of it.
Please.
Well, the darkness in my case, I think in this book stems from the fact that it's quite frequent saying that the way to hell is paved by good intentions, right? So if to simplify the book very much, this is one of the important topics in my book too, and we have like dozens of books like that, starting with Orwell 1948 and so on. But what I was interested in was not this matter of fact, but the question: does that mean that good intentions then and beliefs are intrinsically slippery and end up in the hell? Probably not. But something happens in the process. We have these great intentions, and then sometimes something happens on the way when we want to execute them. And when it happens, and what exactly is the starting moment when it starts to go wrong, is something that is very fascinating for me, because those beliefs of feminism and what this movement believes in is really something that is very, very agreeable. And you asked about the process of re-education, right? So basically, what is the intention of the process is to learn man, to teach man that what is important in women is not what is outside, but what is inside. So first you have to break the connection between attractivity and look. So there are ways how it's being done in the institution, first with like old ladies' bodies, and that's the starting point. But then in the end, the body as such should stop being the trigger for arousement, because what is really arouseful and exciting is the character and the spirituality of your partner, which is kind of beautiful when body stops being the thing and the inner world kind of replaces it. But again, it's scary at the same time when we want to really reach such a ideal. And humor, you might have mentioned it, that humor is also there, and it's important. And in general, I love humor, and I love to change dark moments with humorous ones, because when you create this this tension, when it's both humorous and dark and serious, the tension is what makes it makes the impression stronger, I believe.
I think so too. As I continue asking questions, please, if anyone in the audience has any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature. But my next question, as people begin to type, and I think this follows up with both of you. Each of you is dealing in some ways with memory and trauma, and ideas of sort of what is a human being if we kind of change something about them. So Petra, in the movement, there is this kind of continual threat of electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, that will come in and sort of rewire these men, and this is something they like to avoid. And Kit, in your book, you have what I can sort of describe as like a magic chair, if that's an appropriate description, that erases traumatic memory. And especially with this amazing character that Kit has called Quartz, her memory is gone. So I'm wondering how memory and desire and backstory are things you're both working with, because just to ask a sort of second question on top of this, one thing that Buddha and Vera have in common is that we don't find out a lot about their background until late in the book. Vera's dating experiences, Buddha's own kind of traumatic experiences with his family. So you both seem to be dealing with memory in a lot of different ways in the construction of your characters. Maybe Kit, we'll start with you, and then Petra, if you want to talk about that.
Thanks. I think it's a great question, Adam. I think that question is, in a way, the soul of fiction writing. How do we allow memory to somehow speak through characters and somehow appears on the page and then creates memory for the readers? It's such a weird experience. And I think a lot of characters, you talk about particularly Quartz and that magical chair. I think it's really difficult for traumatic characters because the option, or for any of us actually, how to really forget something that actually traumatic, or we have this fantasy of memory. If something precious, we remember it, and somehow love is a form of memory. But it could be so easily erased. Like when you break up with somebody, you just somehow erase the memory, you erase the memory of them. That's what we're trying to do in order to survive. So I am interested in that sense of forcibly remove one's memory. It sounds really violent, but it's something that we do all the time, every single day. I think it's for potential. And I think, but of course, the larger picture is, as somebody was brought up in Hong Kong, and when the city was handed over to China in 1997, I was told that after that day, I became Chinese. So that sense of the colonial past is not a rosy picture, but it was a memory that somehow has to be removed or erased. And I think in the shanty town, the town was going to be flattened and totally destroyed. So the memory of the town was going to be erased too, you know? So I think a lot of things that we call progress, development, opportunities, actually is a form of memory erasure.
I really love that answer. Petra, how about you?
I think my answer will be shorter. Well, the narrator, the main character, she does not have a lot of memories. She more like lives her life right now, and I didn't want make her very much of a past, because what is really important is her work in the institution where memory plays bigger role in the novel. Is not the main character, but the, let's say, memory about the old world, because now the new world is being built and we are on the verge of it, kind of starting to live the new world, but still memories of the old world and remnants of the old world are still there. So all those like all this like patriarchic society, it's kind of still there, and the fight is not yet finished. But what was interesting for me in terms of speaking about memory was to really create memory about our own current reality, which is there, let's say, more or less the old world, which is being looked from, as if reflected from a little bit of future. But yeah, so that was interesting, and also this principle, when something in the past is or was bad, as the old world from feminist perspective was, then you can much easier defend what you do now. In terms of my society here in Czech Republic, for example, we had communism till 1989, and for a long time, for even until now, but it's being changed. I'm happy for it. Anything, you know, what was happening during our democratic era after 1989 and was not really good, was instantly compared with communist reality and claimed like better. So anything was easily defendable because communism was even worse, wasn't it? So that's also how we work with the memory to defend our time quite often.
I love that. And just a quick follow-up for both of you, because Petra, you use that interesting phrase, old world. And so relative time. In your book, the old world is now, or a little later than now. We have Ben Affleck's funeral at one point, so I think we're a little in the future, unless you know something I don't from the start. And don't tell me if you do. Kit, for you, the present frame that we're in now is like a far-flung new world. So you each are kind of creating worlds. I think we're always creating, whether we're doing historical fiction or dystopic future fiction, we're always relative to our own time. So how did present time impact both of your books? And after that, I have a question in the audience to get to. Two questions. Kit, do you want to start? And then Petra, just the role of present time in the creation of Diamond Hill?
I wrote it in 2017 and 18 intensively, and sometime 2019, and I was doing the editing in 2020. So as some of you know, Hong Kong did go through a very turbulent times in 2019 and 2020. I was very aware of what was happening. I was following the news sometimes on a minute-by-minute basis, what happens in Hong Kong then. I was really aware that what happens in Hong Kong will possibly change how people read Diamond Hill, for good and ill. But it's something that I couldn't control. I mean, it's not my job as the author to worry about what might happen. But of course, it took new meaning when the national security law was imposed in Hong Kong, and I was, of course, it's hard to not becoming. Petra, you mentioned George Orwell. I mean, the sense of self-censorship is palpable in Hong Kong at the moment, as far as I know. Some of my friends told me, and you hear the news. But I try not to change the novel too much, Adam. Like, it was just, it was in a way I tried to capture a moment in history, in Hong Kong history, even though that moment strangely somehow repeats itself in a kind of heartbreaking way. I didn't set out to kind of recreate the recent historical moment. I set out to create a more distant historical moment. So in a way, it was ironic but I somehow just let it happen.
And you have a very quick follow-up question from the chat from Andre here, Kit, who's asking, do you feel that there's a diaspora writing taking place after what you just talked about? And is there anyone you would recommend reading? There's a question in the chat.
You mean writing about?
Do you feel there's now a diaspora of writing taking place after the failings of democracy in Hong Kong? And if so, who else would you name to read? Is a question from Andre in the chat.
Yeah, I think there are, and I think it is the creative spaces in Hong Kong. From some of my friends, it's become harder, definitely, and that's why I think it is the duty of many writers who are not in Hong Kong, outside Hong Kong, to give voice. I don't normally kind of advocate that sense of ethical mission, but I think fiction does have an ethical dimension, especially when a city is going through radical change. I don't mean at the top of my head, don't have a writer I could recommend. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that answer. Petra, so maybe the same question about our time in relationship to the book, and then there's a couple of questions in the chat for you after you answer.
Well, definitely my time and what I see as happening in my society is something that triggered the novel as such. So it was written before the Me Too movement started, and then the critical response after I published the book in Czech Republic was quite confused. I would say there were many voices saying something like, you are as if undermining a sort of movement that is still so fragile and has not reached some important milestones yet, and you are already making fun of it and like kind of toppling it down. I really get a lot of this response that seemed to me as if my novel came to an environment that was not ready for it. But at the same time, I think, and I don't want to sound vain, that good books usually come a little bit ahead of time.
Amen to that. I totally agree. A quick question for you, Petra. Your book is translated by Alex Zucker. And a question in the chat, how does it change your own experience of your work to read it out loud in English? Do you feel any distance or new sense of displacement?
Well, I love Alex Zucker's translations. He translated, this is third book he translated in English, and I can say we are friends and cooperate closely. And I would say that at moments, I love the translation, and at moments is more clear than the Czech original. But it has to do also in general with translations, because as a translator, you have to clearly understand what you translate. But when you write, you it comes out of your head, and you don't have to necessarily understand the meaning of each sentence as much. You just intuitively just do what you feel you need to do. So there were moments when Alex was confused, and I had to explain stuff to him. So then these parts are probably more clear than in English than they were in Czech. So I believe he made it a better, clear book.
Oh, that's so interesting. If we have just time for the last audience question for Petra, as we approach 3 o'clock on the East Coast. Last question. Do you feel the question or problem of objectification of women is perceived and discussed differently in Europe than the United States?
Well, maybe there's something I already tackled here. The critical reception
Yes.
was kind of, critics were confused, and the question often repeated was, so are you a feminist, or are you promoting feminist agenda, or the other way around? And whereas in the US, the reception is more like enjoying the ambiguity, and that's nice.
A rare point in the favor of the US ambiguous reader. Well, Kit and Petra, that clears out our audience questions and takes us to the of our hour together. Thank you both so much for such a generous giving of your time to us. Both of these books, and before we kind of invite Jack back in to close us out, both of these books are wonderful World Edition books. I spent such a happy week reading them, and may I recommend reading them back to back, because the dialogue you heard between Petra and Kit today was a dialogue going on in my head all week, and it really was a pleasure to engage with both of you today.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for your thoughtful and lovely questions.
Thank you, Kit.
Thank you, everyone. Please, it was just fantastic to have all of you here, and I'm so glad we could arrange for all the crazy timing, and it all did work out. So thank you, Kit, Petra, and Adam. You can buy their books in the link in the chat area, and there's Adam's holding them up again, and the Litquake Festival continues through October 23rd. The details are at litquake.org. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, everybody.